Those of you who don't know me, I'm Nikki Buckaloo, and I'll be your speaker for today. How many of you in the room are new today to the series? Raise your hand if you're new. Yay, very good. Let's give them a hand. Great. Thank you for being here. We're glad you made it. And those of you who come regularly, thanks for coming back. And it's interesting, we've delivered this topic. Gosh, I've probably, in the 9 years that we've been doing these seminars, I would say we've delivered some version of today's topic, anywhere from, let's say, 20 to 25 times, right? In some fashion, some version of it. Today we're going to do it a little bit differently, and it's going to take on a little bit of a different flavor. And so we're going to be talking about how to navigate living spaces based on life stages. And as we do that, you have in front of you some information about this topic. We're going to be going through, and I'm going to share with you some things, but these key 5 truths, are part of what I want to talk about. And I'm going to talk about them briefly, and then we're going to go through, and we're going to integrate those into today's conversation. So, as it relates to where we live over time, our why we're moving or doing what we're doing where we live determines our next where. So most of us don't just pack up our stuff and move to a new place for the heck of it, do we? No? We usually have a reason for doing that, and we're going to talk about that today. And then our home represents our identity and is tied to both how we see ourselves and the image we choose to project to others. That's a universal truth, at least here in the United States. We'll talk about that a little bit. After our identity is firmly established, we tend to not want to waver from where we see ourselves living, even at our own peril. If we require care, these priorities must change. 4th truth, living options now available were not available to previous generations. Think about that for a second. Your parents, my grandparents, our grandparents, didn't have the same options we have today, and it's unlikely that the current options will be embraced by younger boomers and Gen Xers. Right? So what's available now will still have to change because the next generation won't necessarily like what's available for this generation. Does that make sense? Some of you are already saying, well, I don't like what's available now either. Right? True, because what's available is largely what was available to the last generation with a few modifications. And then lastly, demographic trends, right? The change in our world, the demographic shift, if you will make planning ahead more important than ever. Okay, so as we dive into this topic, let me just share with you a couple of disclaimers. You guys, it's always fun for me to try to pack 20 years of my education into a 1-hour talk, right? So I'll tell you what inspired me somewhat was this lady, and I'll talk about her a little bit more. Her name is Mama Lee Wachstetter. I always get that wrong, Wachstetter. She lived on a cruise ship for about a decade, through her 70s and 80s. Right before the pandemic came along, she had to move off the cruise ship because the cruise ship was at port and they couldn't have people on it, right? She's not the only one, by the way, that has decided to live out life on a cruise ship after a spouse passed away. So I'll talk more about her in a minute. And then this book, I've talked to you, some of you know that I did my dissertation on the topic of how people downsize after retirement. And this is one of the books that inspired that research. It's called Aging in the Right Place by Dr. Stephen Gallant. And I picked this up as I was preparing for today's talk, just to reference a few sources and things like that. And as I read through it, I thought, you know what? This is a great book for a research student. It is not a great book for a layperson, because it gives you zero solutions, right? It tells you all the problems, and it gives you lots of great information, but there's nothing in here that says, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. It's not practical. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. How many of you have picked up a book that you thought, oh, this would be really great, and then you read it and you went, I am more confused than when I started? Yeah. Okay. Well, if you want to do that, pick up this book.
That's what I called you.
Right? It's also the least expensive textbook I've picked up in a while. It was only $55, and that's kind of unheard of these days in textbook world. So let's talk about this navigating life spaces. And I call it life spaces because I don't want you to think that all I'm talking about here is moving. Life spaces is not just about moving. It might involve a move, but it might not involve a move, right? It could involve just modifying the space in the current home you have. It could be going from one bedroom to another bedroom, or from a bedroom to a living area. It could be a lot of things. And so it could be modifying for accessibility or mobility purposes. But I don't want you to perceive that this talk is entirely about changing where you live, okay? If that's what it was about, it'd be a little self-serving, since that's what I do for a living, right? So I don't want you to think that. I want you to, as you listen to this talk today, I want you to imagine all the options. And all the options include moving or not moving, right? Selling your house or not selling your house. There's all kinds of options out there. But let's first start with, what does it mean? What is home? And then I want to talk about life stages to bring the people up to speed that maybe weren't here in January. How many of you were here in January? Do you remember we talked about life stages? Raise your hand. Great, okay, good. About 50-50 or so. So 50% of you are going to be very familiar with some of the concepts today. Some of you, I'll bring you up to speed real quick, okay? So the essence of home can be described in 3 key elements: familiar places, familiar people and routines, and predictable patterns of interaction. Now this comes from a gentleman who wrote a book called The Art of Coming Home. He also wrote a book called The Art of Crossing Cultures, and it's primarily for students and military, people who live overseas for various different reasons, corporate work, and how hard it is sometimes to transition into a different culture. But he talks about home and what does home mean to people. And I thought it was very apropos that he talked about this. And then he goes on to say, these 3 elements associate the feelings of security, understanding, trust, safety, and belonging. Now, I would contend that this is true. No doubt, I would not argue his point. If you're looking at it strictly from an academic perspective, or from maybe a relocation, like I mentioned, a corporate, or you're traveling abroad or living abroad for some other reason. But having been in real estate for the better part of my adult life, since I was 21, there's something else that we have to look at in addition to that when we start thinking about what home represents here in the United States. Now, for those of you who don't believe that we were in real estate when we were young, this was the year 2000. And this is Chris and I. This is our very first team photo. This is a flashback to the past. The picture on the left is obviously from some of our marketing materials. Aren't we pretty? Aren't we cute? Right? We weren't even married yet at that time. We were still trying to figure it out. And then the picture on the right is a staged picture. It actually took place at what used to be Lionwood, is now Acclaim. Where's my Acclaim folks? Are they here in the room? The folks over at Acclaim, we had Ariane was the marketing director there, and Chris and I didn't have any clients yet that were over the age of 50. And so we said, we need some marketing materials, and can we use some of your residents as models? And she said, sure. So she gathered some people together, and we went in their I don't know, sales office, I think, and we staged some pictures. So we had fake clients that we marketed. We have plenty of real ones now, right? Johnny and Martha, they'll come and take pictures anytime we ask them to, a lot of people. But back in the day, we didn't. So I just wanted to prove, because people say, Nikki, you've really been in real estate that long. Yes, we have. And here's what I've learned. This is why this is important. One of the first things I learned was that where people live is very closely tied to their identity. Right? How many of you have thought about that? When you pick where you're going to live, whether it's a house or an apartment, a senior living community, a neighborhood, you are asking yourself, does this suit me? Do I fit here? Can I see myself living here? There are some other things that we ask ourselves. Is this how I see myself? Right? What is my self-image, and does it match with this place where I live or am thinking about living? As a young agent out showing buyers all the time, driving them around, back before the way the world works now, we used to actually meet people at our office. They'd get in our car with us and we would drive together to look at houses. Most people don't want to do that anymore. They want to meet you there, which I'm actually kind of grateful for. But we would ride with them, so we got to know them really well. They'd tell us their stories and so on. And a lot of times you'd have a couple and they would sit in the back seat, and so you're like a chauffeur kind of. And you would get to overhear the conversations they were having between houses. And how many of those conversations related to, do you see us living there? Does that seem like us? Right? It's about, do we match with that particular house or neighborhood? Then the other one is how other people think of you. And this one's a little tricky because people don't want to admit this. But where they're living largely relates to how other people perceive them. There are certain neighborhoods that some people will never move to because they don't want to be associated with that neighborhood for whatever reason, right? It could be a fancy, really fancy upscale neighborhood, or it could be a lower income neighborhood. Doesn't matter. People have their reasons. There are people who live in Edmond who think of themselves as Edmondites, and they would never cross the border and live in Oklahoma City to save their life. Not a chance in heck. And vice versa. Right? There are Southsiders and Northsiders. How many of you in the room are Southsiders? Raise your hand proudly. Yeah. How many of you are Edmondites? Raise your hand proudly. How many of you are Oklahoma City folks? Raise your hand proudly. How many of you're here because, well, you like coming, but you are never going to leave Canadian County? Raise your hand. Right? I mean, and I could name all kinds of different areas and parts of town, and my husband will never move to Yukon. I made him live there with me for about a year when we first met, and he will never, ever, ever, ever move back. Now, those of you who live in Yukon and love it, great. You know why he won't move there? I don't know. He doesn't know, but it doesn't feel right to him. Does it make sense? He grew up in Oklahoma City. He lived in Oklahoma City his whole life. Now, I will tell you this. I'm from small town America. You guys have heard me talk about Geary. I will never move back to Geary. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Now, what happens when you say never? Ooh, that's a scary path to go down, right? So who knows, one of these days I may find myself, for whatever reason, living in Geary, in which case you can say, Nikki, you should have never said never. Last one on here. Your house, your neighborhood is also about your social status. Now, this is interesting because this is very true when you're in your working years or when you're raising children or in those younger years where, you go, oh, I've arrived. I can now buy a house in X neighborhood, right? Well, that's true. And you would think people would outgrow this. No, they don't. Some do. But there are still people in their 80s right now who will not move out of a house because it represents their social status, their reputation, and how they perceive themselves, and it doesn't matter that where they are living no longer suits them. This is part of their decision-making process, and we're going to talk about this a little bit today, okay? So age doesn't matter. Every age, and I'm going to contend that this is only true mainly in the U.S., maybe some other parts of the world too, but there are parts of the world where this is not true, right? A house is just a house. It's a place you go because it's safe, and you get out of the elements, and that's where you raise your family, right? That's what a house is. But here in the United States, it has lots of other purposes or reasons for being. Now I'm going to shift over slightly to the conversation about stages, life stages. Those of you who weren't here in January, this is from a book called Stage Not Age. It's actually a book written for marketers and people who have services and products for the older generations. And what she talks about is this isn't really about age, it's about stage of life. And she outlines these 5 quarters of life. Yes, I know that's fuzzy math. But the last 2 quarters, the author contends, we get extra years now that people didn't used to get. Right? We live beyond what we think we might live to nowadays. So many people are living to 100. Did y'all see last week where someone passed away, leaving the now oldest man at age 114? Did everybody see that? Yeah, it was in the news and in the papers. Where did he live?
Had good drugs.
Where? Did anybody remember? Europe, I was thinking. Or Spain, possibly, but he's 114 years old, oldest living man. The oldest living person is 116, a woman, and I think she's in Spain. Anyway, what the author here is saying is that we now have to think differently than we used to think because we are living longer, as a rule. Now you may think, I'm not going to. I will probably die at X age. My question is, how do you know? Well, the problem is we don't, right? We don't. And I've told this story before. You know, my mom was 31 when she died of a heart attack. I'm now 53. I don't get to say, well, my parents died at X age, therefore I will, because that doesn't apply. Does that make sense? Many people are living on the assumption that because their parents died at a certain age, that's when they'll probably pass on as well. Well, we know that's just not true anymore. Because of lots of reasons that we won't get into today. Actually, we talked about that last month, didn't we, on the health conversation. So we're going to start thinking about stage, not age, as it relates to navigating how and where we live, because it's not about age anymore. When we first started selling real estate and then specializing in working with downsizers and people retirement and moving to retirement communities, I used to say 80 was the tipping point. 80. When people turned 80, something happened. There was a switch that flipped that was kind of almost a little sense of urgency, like I need to move into a retirement community at 80. That was kind of the switch. So if marketers were marketing to people to sell their house and move into a retirement community, it was people around that 80 age group was the sweet spot, what they call it in marketing, right? Well, guess what? That does not apply anymore. It does not apply anymore. Matter of fact, it's more like 90 now. Right? Because people are living healthier longer. But just scratch the whole age thing altogether, because it's really not about age at all, is it? It's about stage. It's about It's about life circumstances and where people are in their life, and it is really not relevant to how old they are chronologically. So we do know that that people who tend to be widowed, their life changes very drastically, very quickly, right? And we can't know when that's going to happen. So widowhood can be a trigger for people to reevaluate their living space. Job loss, retirement, grandkids being born, right? Illness, disease, all of these things, both positive and not so positive, can affect these decisions. But it is about stages. Now, these are the roughly the 18 stages that this author I was telling you about outlined. And we're not going to talk about all of them, obviously. We're going to talk about a few of them, and then it's really meant for you to use as a example to begin to evaluate your life stage, right? So you to begin to think about what life stage am I in? And by the way, it may not be on this list. This list was based on a research project that they did at a university where they took a bunch of people and got them together and they started listing out the potential names of stages that they were in. And they came up with some really creative ones. This is only some of them. All right, where are you going with this, Nikki? Historically speaking, as our own goals, needs, capabilities, circumstances, and priorities change, our living arrangements typically are adapted to accommodate them. Yes? All right, so here's what I think of. Anybody ever played a game with a kid that's a matching game? Where you have a card and you have to, when you flip the card over, you got to find the matching card, right? Well, this is very similar to that. Only you've got two sets of cards, and you get to see what's on each card. They're all face up, and in this deck of cards laid out, you have people. And they have different circumstances, they're in different life stages, if you will, that are described there. And then in this deck of cards that are face up, there are different living arrangements. And you could ask a little kid, a young person, 3, 4, probably 5 years old, in that age range, early enough, and they could match those up for you. They could say, this person, oh look, there's a mommy, a daddy, 2 little kids, and a dog. This house is perfect for them because it has a yard and 3 bedrooms. They could match those up, yeah? They could do that. Most of us could do that. So it's like a matching game that we really are, as we live life, we go, okay, this circumstance necessitates this change. And so let's talk about what some of those are. Navigating life spaces. So again, this is in your handout down at the bottom, this particular slide. A version of it so that you can kind of read along with me. But I chose this particular example of caregiving, but caregiving with children. So let's say you're a parent or a grandparent and you're raising children. What are you going to evaluate? You're going to evaluate for yourself, you're going to evaluate your lifestyle, goals, and your priorities. What's the most important thing? And for most people, the natural response to that with kids, they say school system, right? What are some other things that you might evaluate if you're looking for a place to live and you've got children that you're raising?
Medical.
Safe neighborhood, thank you. What else?
Doctors.
Schools?
Other children in the neighborhood.
Other children in the neighborhood. Parks.
Medical.
Medical. Is there enough medical, depending on the needs of the child, right? Especially. What else? Okay, so there are certain key things that we're looking for. Yeah, we inherently know this. Now, real estate agents get really good at this, right? They know that if you've got children, one of the first things you want to ask is, what are your priorities? And the parents will say, in some cases, it's not the school system. Maybe their kid goes to a private school, so they can live anywhere. It's about driving that child to that school. So it's about geography. How close are we to that school to be able to get there and to my job, okay? So we have that. Then we have the second one that I put up here, and that's continuous learning. Now think about when you were younger and you were studying to be whatever you were going to be. Johnny, when you went to dental, college for dental school, right? To become a dentist and then to become an instructor and a faculty member. Whatever your academic prowess is, you were a learner. And so you probably moved based on where you were going to school. If you lived on campus especially, right? You lived in a dorm, or you had an apartment, or you lived with family there, whatever it is. You went there and you based your decisions off of a set of priorities, degree program, like my niece right now, Haley, she wants to be a coach. And so I say, well, where do you want to go to school? You need to pick a school that has a degree program that matches with what you want to be, right? And then where are you going to live? Are you going to live in the dorm? Are you going to live in an apartment? And what is the criteria around that? Well, on the right side there, that last column, depending on what you're evaluating, you've got location is important, amenities would be important, the support that you would have around you, depending on what you're doing. And then, of course, affordability. So there's the where, what, who, and how much. Now, I'm sharing this with you because it's such second nature that none of you really had to have a class on this, right? None of us needed a class on how to do this, did we? You just did it. It happened naturally. Now, as real estate agents, we were taught that people did it because then we were able to better serve their needs by knowing how they did it. But I bring this up to you because there are going to be life stages that it does not come natural. And I'm going to talk about those in a moment. But this one I thought was kind of fun. Some of us, I still dream about this. Some of you have already done it. But your life stage is all about adventure and leisure. You retired and decided to go have some fun. Or maybe you decided to take a sabbatical and go have some fun. Or whatever your circumstances were, you decided adventure was going to be part of your life. So you said, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? How do I want to live? And you did this evaluation. I have got to imagine that that's kind of what Mama Lee did. So her husband passed away. And when he passed, they had cruised in their lifetime as part of their leisure. That's what they did. And he told her, don't stop cruising. When he passed, he said, don't stop cruising. And she took him very seriously. And in her decade or so of living on a cruise ship and cruising, she took some 215 cruises. She cruised around the world many times. Many times. And her book is actually really interesting if you guys wanted to pick it up. I may be homeless, but you should see my yacht. Right? She sold her home and she started cruising. It cost her about $164,000 a year to cruise at one point. And so she figured it was cheaper for her to live on a cruise ship than to live in a retirement community. Interesting, right? So adventure and fun is one of the reasons that we reevaluate where we're going to live. Now, I'm going to make one point here before I move on to the next section, and that is that I think too many people reach an age, pick an age, it's various ages for different people, and they say, I'm too old for that. I'm too old to go live on a cruise ship. I'm too old to go follow my dreams. I'm too old to travel. I'm too old for whatever. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not an accurate statement. Now, that may not be your stage of life, right? Your circumstances might dictate that you can't do that currently. But age doesn't dictate that. Can we all agree that? Okay. So can we all agree to that? I don't hear a lot of confidence in the room. Age does not dictate the level of adventure that you get to go on.
Amen.
Thank you. Some of the people in the room, though, I think live a life where somebody has told them you're too old for that, and they bought it, and now they're at that age, and now they think they're too old for that. So, quick side note here. So in gerontology, I got my degree in gerontology in '97. There were about 15 people in my class, and we sat in a kind of a horseshoe shape. And I remember the instructor for that particular class in gerontology asking how old we thought we wanted to live to be. Now, mind you, I was 27 years old at the time. She went around, I was the very last one. Everyone gave their age. It ranged anywhere from late 70s to into the 90s. And when she got to me, I said 120. And all of my classmates went, ugh. And I said, I'm sorry, what do you mean, ugh? 120. And the guy in the middle, I remember, his name was Larry, he goes, why would you want to be in a nursing home, being with a feeding tube, people having to change your clothes, and change your bed? And I said, I'm sorry, my 120 and your 120 look very differently. Very differently. I'm going to be on a boat somewhere. And I'm going to have crew members who do the things I need for them to do while I sit and watch the sunrise and the sunset and go out on my paddleboard in between. And he said, at 120? And I'm like, yes, that's my 120. If you want your 120 to look that way, more power to you. But too many of us are limiting our sights on what we've seen in the past versus what is possible in the future. And that's why I like Mama Lee. I don't know where she is now. I understand she's about 95 right now, and I could not find exactly where she is, and that might be a good thing. She's become a little bit famous, and people are probably trying to reach out to her, and that might be a little bit annoying. All right, so here's a historical and current day truth. Are you ready? As it relates to where we live over time, our why ultimately determines our next where. So why I want something or why I need something determines my next where. Now, here's the current day challenge associated with this. I don't like it, but here it is. When we are capable, we tend to enjoy finding or creating new living arrangements, right? But when it's out of necessity, say disability or functional decline, we tend to resist change. Can anybody identify with that statement? Right? Some people can, not everybody. But I've shown this before, and I'll share it with you in the context of today's conversation. But this is like a chart that people in the medical field use when people reach a certain age, somewhere around, say, 60. They start using this to evaluate a person's level of frailty. They call it a frailty scale. And so you start out very fit, and they may even use some version of this with Oklahoma Senior Games, I don't know. But the goal with Oklahoma Senior Games is to get people more fit, okay? More fit, meaning wherever they are now, better at the end of the games, okay? Whatever that is, better. So very fit to well, managing well, and then that's when things start to kind of go downhill. Then they go to number 4, vulnerable, 5, mildly frail, 6, moderately frail. Now, I added, for my own purposes, those little caution signs and the red caution signs. Those are not part of the original frailty index. Those are mine. I added those. So then from moderately frail, you go to severely frail, very severely frail, and then terminally ill. Okay, so now, this is not based on age. Not. Someone could be very severely frail and be in their 50s or 60s or even younger, right? Someone can be very fit or well or managing well up into their hundreds, yeah? So this is not about age. This is about stage. This is about where we are in our health span, not our lifespan. So as we think about that, let's talk about some additional life stages that we have to think about our space and where we live, whether temporarily, permanently, or otherwise. We can either be reactive or proactive in our approach. How many of you know someone who had a fall, broke a hip, and then had to be put in a nursing home? Raise your hand. Okay, is that proactive or reactive? Exactly. How many of you know someone who, perfectly healthy and fit and capable, up and decided to move to a retirement community? Raise your hand. Right. Happens all the time. Proactive or reactive?
Proactive.
Proactive. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, okay? So these are the 4 I picked, and these may not suit you at all. You may say I'm not in one of those stages, but I'm just using these as examples, right, for you when you do your homework on this. So I picked 4 different stages. Caregiving, not caregiving in the time where we were caring for children this time, but maybe in this case we're caring for others, like a spouse or a parent or a sibling or a family member or even a neighbor, or caregiving, or a friend. So optimizing health would be the second one, and this is where we're talking about yourself, optimizing your own health. Has anybody here ever had a heart attack and had to go to cardiac rehab? Or a stroke and they had to go to rehab? Or any other illness, or disease or surgery, knee replacement, had to go to rehab, right? Okay, optimizing health means adapting to your lifestyle to do that. Okay? It could also mean you're perfectly healthy, you've never had anything wrong with you, and you are doing things preventatively to optimize your health, yeah? So this is not one thing, this could be a whole gamut of things. Legacy is interesting because legacy also can be a whole lot of things. It can be, you know what? I want, Chris and I'll give you an example. Chris and I said when we had grandkids, we don't want to gift them things at Christmas that they don't need. So we don't give them stuff. We don't give them toys and clothes and things like that. We could. They love opening gifts. We decided we wanted to gift them a trip every year as a part of their legacy with us. It makes me tearful just thinking about it. It's important to us. We start doing it when they're 6. So Layla, she's been on a few. Maverick, this will be his second this year. God love us. Pray for us in July. Alan, he's different than his sister. Eli's not old enough yet. Kate's not old enough yet. At some point in time, we'll be traveling a lot. I'm just saying. God willing. That's part of our legacy. That's not age specific, is it? It's stage specific. It depends on who you are and what your circumstances are. The last one is end of life. This is also not age specific, right? If you have a terminal illness, your runway is shorter than someone who doesn't. End of life, can we all agree, is going to come for all of us? I don't need a panel of experts to tell us that. So end of life, you can either be what? Proactive or reactive. Okay? So here's another truth as we talk about this. After our identity is firmly established, we tend to not want to waver from how we see ourselves living, even at our own peril. If we require care, however, these priorities must change. Let me give you some examples. I'm going to put this slide up to talk about these examples. So before I give you these examples, let me share something with you. Sometimes I vacillate whether I'm going to share certain things or not until I get up here. And so I was going through some old evals. These were from the January seminar. And some of you filled these out for us. Thank you for that. And what we do is we go through and we look at what people said, and we try to cater the talks that we do throughout the year based on the answers that you gave us. And as we looked through, one of the things we asked you to do was circle which stage of life you felt like you were in. And sometimes you're in more than one. So some people circled several and some people circled one. By far, the most that were circled, over and above all of them, were resetting life's priorities and transition. Those two were the most commonly circled. And then from there, legacy would be the next one. And very few of the others, frankly. There were some of the others, but very few. Some people just circled the entire column of reinvention. Right? Which is fair, because you may be in some version of all of those stages. Repurposing, relaunching, transition, renaissance, various different categories there. And so when I was thinking about that, I thought, okay, so what does that mean? Transition can mean a lot of things. It can mean transitioning from employment to retirement, which we don't use that word anymore, right? No more retirement. We're transitioning from employment to something else. whatever that else is. For some people, transitioning is maybe they're moving in town or out of town. Maybe they're transitioning in or out of a relationship. So there's a lot of ways that people can transition. And then as far as resetting priorities, there's a lot of reasons people could reset priorities. So again, at some level, all of us are in transition, yeah? I told somebody the other day, she said, Nikki, I'm gonna say a prayer for you. And I said, please do. And I think that surprised the person. And she said, why do you want me to pray for you? I said, well, if you're gonna be praying for me, just go ahead and pray that whatever God has in store for me next, I'm prepared for. Because change is in the air. And I don't know what it is. And I don't know, it's a little scary. But prayers can't hurt, right? Because I need to be geared up. Well, all of us are kind of in that same boat, aren't we? We really don't know what's ahead of us. And so really all we can do is gear up, right? Gear up, have some faith, but gear up in the process. So this transition thing, independence, there's an illusion of independence that we have, right? It starts at around age 15, 16, give or take, when we think we want to be what? Curtis, you got kids in college, they want to be independent, don't they? But they still want you to pay for their everything. Yes, illusion of independence. So then we truly become independent, and then what happens? Well, we have kids or a spouse, and then we become what? Interdependent again, right? So we go from being dependent to interdependent to dependent for about 2.5 seconds, back to interdependent, and then back to the very end, unless you die in your sleep, dependent. At end of life, even if it's for a short period. Does that make sense? Okay, so we are all at some level of transition from independence to interdependence, or from interdependence to dependence. Now, I told you I was going to tell you some stories. Let me start with this one. My Aunt Sylvia. She's the one I told you about, that I wear this necklace.
You can do it, Nikki.
This is her car that she drove into 2 houses after going through a guard gate. Because in her words, her foot got stuck. Her foot did not get stuck. She had neuropathy in her legs and her feet. And she pressed on the accelerator and did not know it. Because you can't feel it until it's too late. Right, Mark? Right? Nerve Renewal Clinic handles this every day, all day long. Thank God she didn't kill herself or someone else. But that was the day that my Uncle Donnie said, no more. It's time. And she moved to Spanish Cove. And she moved into an independent living apartment at Spanish Cove, where she passed a few years later after moving into the nursing side of things there. But my Aunt Sylvia was fiercely independent, even as a widow. She did not like change very much. And so anytime it was even mentioned that maybe she should simplify and downsize and maybe stop driving, she resisted vehemently. Right? I am her niece. I could be her child or her alter ego, I'm not sure which. I'm fiercely independent. But I have to remember that she could have killed someone's child that day on a bicycle. That could have been someone's breakfast area in their house that she drove through that morning, right? So we have to be realistic, not just with ourselves, but with everyone around us. And things change, and this isn't about age, this is about stage. So I don't care what age we are, we have to be thinking about how do we need to adapt. So another story I'll tell you real quick, a very similar story happened just last week. Chris comes home, we're sitting having dinner, he gets a text message, he says, uh-oh, I'm gonna have to go down to XYZ condo unit in our condo complex. We'll call him Tim. His name's not Tim, but Tim drove through the fence in the condo complex. And he said, I don't really know what happened, so I'm gonna go down there. He opened his garage, did he open the garage door or did he drive through the garage door?
Opened the garage door.
Yeah. Opened his garage door, backed up, straight back through and hit the brick wall and knocked it down in his pickup truck. He is in his later stages of life, age-wise, and you know what he told the people there, Chris and the people at our condo complex? His foot got stuck. Wow, that sounds very familiar. His foot did not get stuck. He has neuropathy. He's known this for a while, and he probably shouldn't be driving, and yet he has been. And I am thankful that there was not someone behind him walking their dog or getting some exercise when he went out of his garage fast enough to knock down a brick wall. It would have killed somebody. He's fine. Do you think he'll move? Do you think he'll stop driving? 100% guarantee you next week he'll be driving, if not now. How scary is that? It's scary for me. I'm really, really, really grateful that his unit is in the back of our complex, because when he backs out, his unit does not affect anybody else. If he was in my unit, I'm right smack dab in the middle, people walking by all the time, people walking their dogs, right? Thank God he is in the far back corner, and the only thing he's going to hurt, more than likely, is himself or that fence again. Another quick story. Nobody likes to hear these, but I'm kind of the only one that'll just say it like it is around that I've noticed. So I'm just going to say it. We live in a condo complex. It's been around since the 80s. A lot of people who bought in there when it was built bought it new, and they've lived there ever since, and are now finding themselves in that stage of life where things are getting a little bit harder physically. And we now have, to my knowledge, 3 people who have recently moved there, not lived there since the beginning, but moved there because they were having memory problems. This is not a retirement community. There is no health care. There's nobody there to check on them. But in their family and their own infinite wisdom, simplifying their life made sense, and I don't disagree. But now, guess what? They're living in a condo complex where, guess who gets to take care of them now? The neighbors. So now we have people wandering down the middle of May Avenue because they have dementia, and their family thought it was a good idea for them to move to a condo complex. Why do you think that is? Well, first of all, it's cheaper to buy a $250,000 condo than it is to move into a memory care community. But it's also because that person probably would not agree to move into a memory care community, and the family is unwilling to make them do it or move them in with them. You guys follow me? Lots of issues with this. 3 people right now in our condo complex. Chris's comment I had not thought of, and I really wish he'd have kept it to himself, was what happens when they burn the unit down? How many people do you hear that leave their heater on or their stove on or a candle burning and they burn their house down? Guess what? It's attached to 3 other units. Mine might be one of them. Is that fair to the neighbors?
No.
No, but did anybody care?
No.
Literally, we sold one of those units. We didn't sell it. It was for sale. We went down and looked at it. Chris's mom had made an offer on it, and she didn't get it. The person who got it, the family told the homeowners association the reason she's moving there is because she has dementia. She's 90. The family bought her a condo unit to move into because she has dementia. Truth. Let's think about this, folks. Okay? So let's consider our stages of life when we move someplace, and let's make it make sense. Now, that person doesn't have to move, by the way. They can stay in their own home, and they can hire somebody. Next story, my friend Bob, who doesn't mind me sharing this, I've asked him. His wife diagnosed with dementia about, I don't know, it's probably 6, 7, 8 years ago now. Got significantly worse. He tried with all his might at home to keep her at home. He has done amazing, gallant things. I mean, he's a saint. He and his daughter, their daughter, amazing. Until he ended up in the hospital. He's 88. He ended up in the hospital for 3 days, and the doctor said to him, point blank, "You can't do this anymore. You are going to die." The reason he was in the hospital was stress. He basically was so stressed and so fatigued because he had 24-hour round-the-clock care for a wife who, at later stages of dementia, can't sleep, wanders, is incapable of comprehending anything memory-wise for more than a couple of seconds. And so he ended up in the hospital. While he was in the hospital, his daughter came and stayed with the mom and basically said, "How are you doing this? How are you doing this?" Well, he wasn't very well. He's trying. So they did find a place to move her that is a memory care community. Problem is, it's not the one they wanted. The one they wanted has a waiting list. Concordia was number 1 on their list. Southern Plaza was number 2 on their list. It was also with a waiting list. There was another one up in Edmond called Iris, number 3, waiting list. So they took the first one available. But he waited reactively until he absolutely had to do it, rather than going ahead and doing it while he's healthy and making the transition a little bit easier. So transition is hard. And the reason I bring up these stories is because I want people to hear that this is a universal problem, right? This is a universal problem. This is not a me problem, and I'm not pointing my finger at anybody in this room and saying it's a you problem. I'm saying we're all in this together. I live in a condo complex. It's an our problem now. Does that make sense? And we have to help people begin to think about things differently rather than be reactive, being proactive. And that's going to be different for everyone. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to this. But one of the things that is not a solution is moving a 90-year-old person with dementia who can't take care of themselves in a big house into a smaller one. I can pretty well tell you that's not the right solution, but people are doing it every single day. We see it in real estate. We have agents calling and saying, "Hey, I need a place that would be suitable for someone with dementia." And I'm like, what? Well, this family wants to move their mom and dad into some place and they have dementia. And I'm like, and you're wanting to sell them a place? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Well, that's what they want. Okay. Enough of that. That's my own soapbox. Okay. Truth. Demographic trends will make planning ahead more important than ever. Okay? This is the gist of my whole talk right here. A village, a support system, if you will, is required. It's required. You have to have people, don't you? Right? And if you didn't birth those people, or if you have outlived those people, then guess what? You have to find what? New people. More of them. Preferably people you know, not preferably people who live in a condo complex, right? So how do you do that? I don't know. The answer is different for everyone. I'm going to tell you another story. This is a happy story. These folks moved, we've moved them twice, at least twice, maybe more than twice. We've spent a lot of time with these folks. I've talked about them before. Dr. and Mrs. Ladd. They are retired. He is a retired professor from SNU. She ran the library in Bethany for many years. They are, what do you call them, genealogists? You know, they do genealogy. Yeah, they've published 40 some odd books on their own family. And they're massive researchers. I mean, they talk about, oh my gosh, these people's minds, they're brilliant, both of them. She has an honorary doctorate from her family. Because he had a doctorate and he was a professor, and she basically, we all know that behind every good man is a good woman, right? And so she got an honorary doctorate that was hanging on her wall in her hallway. And so this couple, they moved to Spanish Cove 20 some odd years prior to actually needing any kind of help at all. They moved into independent living, much like what Johnny, you and Martha, did. Moved into independent living. They had the time of their lives. Are y'all still doing dragon boat stuff? Are you doing the Oklahoma Senior Games dragon boat?
We're doing the marathon.
The marathon, okay.
Yeah.
So
Dragon boat is September.
September, okay. So you guys didn't move there because you needed care, did you?
No.
No. These folks did not move there because they needed care. They moved there because they were tired of managing a house.
Yes.
And they were looking down the road. They were in their 70s, looking down the road. Well, guess what? Down the road came. And when down the road came, and mainly Mrs. Ladd, she has severe back problems. I don't know exactly her issue, but they're back problems. And she really was struggling getting around. And so they downsized from their 3-bedroom apartment at Spanish Cove into an assisted living apartment. 2-bedroom assisted living apartment. They had to downsize, no doubt about it. They lived there for a while, and then as things progressed, unfortunately, they needed a little more nursing support and care, so they downsized into the from the assisted living into the long-term care part of Spanish Cove, which they didn't have to downsize a lot. This apartment was very similar in size, a little different makeup, but believe me when I say they've got a lot of stuff. Lord help us all, they have a lot of, they're genealogists. I mean, they collect things for a living. It's, for a hobby, that's what they do. And so it was very important to them to have their office moved. So they had an office in their independent living, both of them, and they had an office in their assisted living, both of them, and they have offices in their long-term care, both of them. Not joking, because they can. And so they planned ahead for this. It's interesting. They were very proactive, but I am going to contend this, and they would agree with me. They didn't want to. It wasn't like one day they woke up in independent living and went, woohoo, let's move over to the assisted living building. No, that is not how it went. It took time for them to wrap their head around the fact that their capabilities were no longer what they needed to be to stay in independent living, and they basically had to be convinced to move into assisted living. Once they were convinced, then they were fine with it. Same thing into the long-term care part. But they had planned ahead such that it was not a massive undertaking. Matter of fact, their daughter relied on our team to help them make that move. She's got severe asthma, the daughter does. And so breathing in a lot of dust and things like that is not healthy for her. And these people, what did I say they do for a hobby? They're genealogists. They have lots of paper, lots of it. So basically, the daughter knew back when they moved to Spanish Cove that they would have this progression built in. It was built in. They had a plan. It may not be your plan. I'm not telling you you need to move to Spanish Cove or to Concordia or anywhere else. I'm just saying you need a what? Say it.
Plan.
A plan. A plan. So here are the 5 questions to ponder. And I would contend that if you work through these, it would give you a good start towards that plan. It's not actually going to, it's not going to complete your plan by any means, but this is the start. So let me just read through these real quick. Ask yourself, number one, what stage of life am I in now? Am I transitioning to a new stage currently, or might I expect to do so in the near future? Yes, Nikki, I realize that's 2 questions. But what stage of life am I in now? Because, Chris and I are in our 50s. Yes, Chris, you are in your 50s now. Yes, you are. After you turn 50, you're in your 50s, right? Yes. So in your 50s, we're planning. We're planning for what's next. Because we live in a 2-story condo. Right? 2-story condo. Something needs to change in the future. Potentially. 2, is it time to reevaluate my desires, goals, needs, and priorities for this stage of life, or possibly next stage if I am in transition? Now, this does not mean a negative change, by the way. This might mean that you do what Mama Lee did, and somebody may leave here today and call me and say, Nikki, I won't be there next month. I'm moving on to a cruise ship. Right? I don't know. But you may say, you know what, I'm widowed now, and my husband never wanted to travel, and so guess what? I'm traveling the world. Great, good for you. Right? I don't know what your plan will be for transition, but create one. Number 3, does my current space or place make the most sense for my current stage and or my next? I didn't say this earlier, so I'll point it out here. My Uncle Don passed a little over a year ago. And he had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Yukon, lovely house, very modest, nothing fancy, 1 level. And when he was diagnosed with cancer, stage 4, and we knew that it was, time was limited, he transitioned in his own home, right? He didn't move. He chose not to move. He wanted to stay there, so hospice came in and he passed away in his home. He went from his house, and mainly his garage, because that was his place, was his garage, to his bedroom. His bedroom became his space, right? His bed, a table, and a bathroom. In the end, that was his space. I remember Mr. Ladd, Dr. Ladd, saying to me one time, and I have a quote somewhere that I've put in some things that I do. He said, just randomly one day when we were helping him, he said, my life just keeps getting smaller and smaller. Right? That's what happens as we get towards the end of life. And that's not an age-related thing. It's a what? Stage-related thing. And it will happen to all of us at different paces. Number 4, am I able to objectively evaluate and assess my life stage and whether my space or place makes sense? Or do I need some help in doing so? And Marilyn Olson with Villages OKC said something to me one day, and she said, Nikki, she said, you have to have people around you can trust to tell you the truth, and then you have to believe them. Right? You have to task someone that you trust to look you in the eye and say, Aunt Sylvia, it's time. And then if I'm the Aunt Sylvia, I have to say, I trust you're right. Right? Because we suck at making those decisions for ourselves. Right? We do. We're bad at it. We overestimate our abilities and we underestimate our capabilities. And so we have to have friends in our life that when we have toilet paper out coming out of the back of our pants and we're walking through the church, that your friend will tell you before you get to the sanctuary that you have toilet paper hanging out the back of your skirt, ladies, right? Your friend will tell you you have lipstick on your teeth, right? We gotta have those friends to tell us, and we gotta trust them. Number 5, who in my life currently can I have an honest conversation with about my space and place, related goals, needs, desires, and priorities? If you don't have that person or people, you have to find them. You have to create them. You have to get out and do that. It might be your kids, or it might not. It might be a friend. It might be a family member. It might be your pastor. It could be one of our education partners. It could be me. It doesn't matter to me who it is, but you have to have that honest conversation. They have to be willing to have it too, because I know people will say, well, it's my kids. And I'll say, great, have you talked with them? And they'll say, well, they don't want to talk about it. Then it's not your kids. Right? Does that make sense? They have to be willing to have a mutual conversation with you about it. By the way, it's no different than the conversation about the cruise ship. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall the day that Mama Lee said to her kids, I think I'm going to move on to this cruise ship. Right? Can you imagine if Wanda came to us and said, hey, Nikki, Chris, I'm going to move on to a cruise ship. First of all, she'd never do that. But they would warrant some conversation, yeah? So who is it you're going to have that conversation with? I'm not saying you need to get their permission at all. I'm just saying there are people in your life that you can talk to about these things. If you need to have that person you don't know, that's what your evaluation asks you today, is I think there's a place on there that actually says, I would like someone to contact me about, and there's about 4 boxes on there, and if it's not on there specifically, then write it in, because I thought we had it on there, but if it's not on there specifically, write it in. I need someone to talk to about this. Villages OKC, if you're a member of Villages OKC, Marilyn and her team and volunteers and their caregiver support team, where's Steve at? Yeah, Steve over here. These guys do these consultations all the time with people that are just saying, hey, I don't know what my plan is. I do them. Our team does them. I know Julie at Concordia and Kelly at Concordia, and I know all these people do these conversations all the time. And that's a great place to start, right? If you want to test drive it on somebody before you tell your family. I'm going to stop there. I could talk for 3 hours. You guys really would want a bathroom break if I did that. So I'm going to stop there, and before I make a couple of housekeeping announcements, I'm going to ask if there's anything on anybody's mind, either a question or a comment that you would want to share about today's topic. And since we don't have mic runners or anything like that, you just have to yell it loud, and then I'll repeat it. But is there anybody that wants to share something? I saw, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, but I couldn't really see it, that frailty index.
The frailty scale, yeah.
Yeah, is that available somewhere?
It is, yeah. Matter of fact, Danielle can send that out. We've sent it out a few times to different people for different reasons. And so if you write on the evaluation form that you'd like a copy of that, just write it on there under what it says, what questions do you have? If you'll write on there, I'd like a copy of the frailty scale. We can drop a copy of that in the mail to you with your follow-up letter for sure. Yep. And by the way, let me point out something. When you go to the doctor, they're not going to pull that out of a file and be looking at it with you. This isn't something that they will share with you. This is just a clinical scale that's put into graphic form. But when they do your charting at a hospital or in the doctor's office, they're charting these things. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah. So this is not going to be on the wall probably in your doctor's office. Yeah, Herb?
Now, in talking about what you were talking about with caregivers, they're waiting too long.
Yeah, waiting too long, yep.
And they end up not being able to get into the place that they want.
Yep.
With their loved ones. I run 6 caregiver support groups around town, and I recommend to all of them that they go find a place now, not wait, and that they get on the waiting list, because normally when you get on the waiting list, when you float to the top of it, they'll let you stay there for a while.
Okay, so let me repeat what you're saying, and then if you have a second part to that, I'll come back to you. So Herb he's here as a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association Oklahoma chapter. He leads 6 support groups. He is intimately involved in helping people, and particularly when they need to place someone. And his point was that you owe it to yourself to plan ahead and know what's out there, what the communities have to offer, pick the place or places and get on their waiting list. And what will happen is as he put it, float to the top, as you make it to the top of the list, they'll call you. And they'll say, hey, we have a spot available. And you can decline it, but you'll stay up there on that waiting list. And that way, when a spot is available, there's a higher likelihood of availability rather than starting from scratch when you need it tomorrow. Is that accurate? Or, yeah.
And I'll add one thing that for caregivers. 1 out of every 3 family Alzheimer's caregivers dies before the loved one they're taking care of.
Let me repeat that. 1 out of 3 family caregivers caring for someone with dementia dies before the person they're caring for.
Now, if you get involved in a support group or you have some sort of support, then that ends that. You don't end up in that statistic. So the way you avoid, I have never, in the 10 years that I've been doing this and I've been watching other people in the support groups, I've never seen one caregiver die as a result.
Okay, so conversely to that stat, in the support groups, people who are in support groups, that happens rarely, if ever. The person doesn't die before their loved one. And it's because they have people, isn't it? They have support. And there's peace of mind that comes with that. Let me do a quick plug for the Alzheimer's Association real quick. You know how I mentioned that people are resistant to change? Amazingly, how many people I have recommended going to a support group because they have been told that someone in their life has dementia and they are resistant to even go to a support group. Resistant to even go to a support group. And I'm like, why are you resisting going to a support group? There's various reasons why, but we know that people who are involved in a support group, whether it's at a church or through an association or some organized fashion, we know that their outcomes are better, statistically, exponentially better than people who try to do it on their own. Yeah, good. Okay, time for one last comment if we have one, or question. Did anybody learn anything today? Yeah? Let me ask a question. Thank you for that. Carol Jean, you're always so great to applaud and say it was wonderful. I want to say something on my heart as you guys get up and you're doing your evals and you're moving on is, I want to say this. Please, what I'm saying today, please don't hear this as preaching or pointing fingers. I realize that I am preaching to the choir here, that you are the planners. Really, when I talk about these things, what I'm hoping is that you will also be the messengers, right? That you'll take this to the people who aren't the planners and that you will help them plan. Because I get it. You're here and you've been coming, many of you, for years, and you are doing the work. The problem is the people who aren't here today. Do you guys get that? And so I hope that you take that in the spirit in which it was intended. On that note, before you head out and finish your rest of your beautiful day today that's going to be, stop by the education partner tables. And here's what I would recommend you do. Is those of you who are on this side of the room, I'd just start over there. And those of you on this room, I'd start over here. And I would just make my way and I'd cross paths in the middle. When you're finished, give your evaluation form to Danielle back there in the back of the room. And if you have questions or you want to be connected with someone, you can write it on the evaluation form or you can just let them know at their table. Don't forget about the Oklahoma Senior Games folks. What they're here today to do is educate you on either how to participate as a athlete or how to become a coach or refer or recommend a coach. Is that accurate, ladies? Yes? And guys, the lessons are free. The only thing you have to pay for as a participant is there's a small charge to be a part of the ceremony and the program and the competition. And by the way, if you know somebody that can't afford that, let us know and we'll figure it out, because it's not bad at all. It's like $50-something, right? Yeah. And so if you know somebody that can't afford that, we will help with that. Yes?
Nikki, I wanted to make a comment.
Yep.
You're not preaching to the choir. It is so nice to know
that you help us understand ourselves, and it makes it better for us to discuss with our children.
Thank you, Betty. That means a lot.
What we need to know.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's my hope, because we're all in this together, right? This is not a you and a them thing. This is all, we're all in this together, right? We're all aging. We're just doing it at different times, aren't we? Right? We're all at a different space. Yeah, Martha?
Short statement, short. Plan, this is what you're saying. Plan before you need to plan.
Yeah.
Make plan before you need to plan.
Plan before you need to plan.
Yes.
Yes. And then go do it. And then enjoy life. Don't you guys have fun? Oh my gosh, every day. All right. Guys, give yourselves a hand. Thank you for being